The Theravada system of Buddhism, or school of Buddhism, in America is called Vipassana. Has anybody heard the word Vipassana? Vipassana is usually the word that people use when they're referring to the Theravada Buddhist practice. The earliest practice of Buddhism. But not very much has been said about Vipassana, and maybe that's good, because knowing sometimes about Vipassana makes you think that that's where you should be, and that's what you should have. First of all, Vipassana, you cannot will it. In due time, it will come. So Vipassana is normally translated as insight. Insight. What is insight? When you have an insight into a situation, you have a new understanding of it, that you can penetrate into it. And when you penetrate into it, you basically disarm it. It ceases to be an enemy. It ceases to be an obstacle. It just becomes itself. That is insight. It may not mean much to you. And that's all right. Because understanding will come if you practice. It might take a couple of weeks, a couple of years, a couple of lifetimes. What we do when we practice is we create conditions for the insight to arise. Insight, Vipassana, is the same as what we call in Pali, Anya. This is prajna in Sanskrit, wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is not facts, not pieces of information that you learn in school. Like, when did Columbus discover America? Never. It was already here. So Vipassana is not about pieces of information. Pieces of information you read about, and you can make a list of them. There's no list in Vipassana. It's insight. It's seeing into the nature of life. And what do I call life? You are life. Me. Vipassana is insight into the nature of me. Because outside of me, there is nothing. Everything you experience through yourself. So you don't go out there and experience things out there. You experience it inside. See how the experience arises and what constitutes experience. But Vipassana is insight into so-called experience, so that we have a different relationship to experience. We begin to understand what experience is. The most common name for experience is self. Not only what other people think you are. That is not important, although that impacts on what you think you are. And that is the subject matter of insight. This seems so highfalutin, so profound. It is and it isn't. So Vipassana insight is the same thing as wisdom. But like wisdom doesn't have size or dimensions. Vipassana doesn't have size or dimensions. But since we are beings with chronology. In other words, there's the past, there's the future, and there's the present. That's what I mean by chronology. Chronos was the god that supposedly created time in the Greek tradition. The beginning of wisdom is, for many of us, that which got you to start studying Buddhism. Maybe for whatever reason that might be. Maybe you just found it attractive. Maybe you found it exotic. Maybe you wanted something other than what you grew up with, like the Judeo-Christian tradition. Maybe that doesn't seem to be relevant to you now. Maybe because if your daughter was studying philosophy and started talking to you about it, and you say, "What the heck? I want to know what she's talking about." Or maybe because you have a friend who tells you, meditation has really calmed me down. No matter what the reason, that is the kind of Vipassana. It's the beginning of wisdom. In the Hebrew tradition, it says fear is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That is not so in Buddhism. Although sometimes fear is what brings us to the practice. Part of my own motivation is watching my mother die from cancer in a third world country in the Philippines. No insurance, and medical services are out of reach. So basically, you just spend your time dying with no relief of the pain. Very different. But you know what? After her last day, she was smiling. She was not Buddhist. But Buddhism is just a system. There are other systems for people to understand what life is about and what matters in life. This is nothing. Okay, so I wanted to connect this with two words that came up. I do a Tuesday group for more people who. Anyway, I do a Tuesday group, and it came up there, the idea of the concept or the word Kensho and Satori. You remember Satori? Some of you may. With the beat poets like Kerouac and others, they talk about Satori and Kensho. Kensho and Satori are Japanese words. They're more related to Zen. Not quite with the Taoism, although you're absolutely right. Taoism and Buddhism kind of got married in China. And so Taoism affected the practice and the understanding of Buddhism and vice versa. Kensho and Satori are kind of similar to Vipassana. As a matter of fact, they're probably the same if we understand Vipassana. Vipassana in the beginning is like a flash that is so amazing. And as you were talking about, when it happens, you're so completely in it, you don't even know it's happening. Because you're completely present. But then afterwards, then you say, wow, what happened? I disappeared. Because so much of our suffering is really connected to a particular idea that unfortunately we all carry on our backs like a sack of potato. again, is called self. In the Zen tradition, they don't talk about Satori and Kensho as the absence or the realization of self. But in that tradition, as well as the Theravada, Vipassana is like a glimpse into how it is to suddenly, completely have no burden to carry. Because there's no self. But we may not make that connection in the beginning. That the reason there's no burden, the Pali word for burden, is dukkha. The reason why there's no dukkha is because there's no self. There might be pain, but there's no dukkha. That's what I was referring to a while ago as having space. What created space? The absence of the self. Because when the self is present, it fills up the whole space. That's what we call in English selfish. That's what we look at the so-called world through self, with self as the reference point. How am I going to gain from this? How is this going to harm me? What does it say about me, me? See how limited that makes our experience of life. Vipassana destroys that. But usually, it's just a very quick flash. By quick flash, I don't mean you can time it. Because it usually happens, but not always, when you are completely engrossed in the object. The object in this case being what we call the present moment. The present moment is not things. It is the experience. So part of the difficulty of meditating is to shift from what we are used to doing to experiencing. Most of the time, we do not experience. We think we experience. This is different from experiencing. I have a quote here from D.T. Suzuki. He was one of the earliest Easterners to come to America and teach us about Eastern religions, particularly Zen, because he was a Japanese Zen. And he says about Satori, he says, it is really another name for enlightenment. It is this acquiring of a new point of view in our dealings with life and the world that is properly called by Japanese Zen students Satori. So it's a new, that's what we call it, insight. And insight can happen outside of the Buddhist tradition. And for some of us, that may be why you came and became interested in Buddhism. Maybe some of you realize, this idea of 9 to 5 and earning money that, almost as quickly as you earn it, you spend it. Then you begin to wonder, is that all? Maybe there's something more than what our physical senses tell us that exists. Science is wonderful, but you've seen the findings, the discoveries of science change. I mean, just go back to the 1700s, or go back to 1950. Or go back to 1985 when Steve Jobs rolled out the Mac, the first real PC. Imagine a computer in your hand and now a computer in your pocket. Huh? Science is wonderful, but it's such a small part of life. Unfortunately, I think for many of us, that technology has taken its place and become another addiction, another obsession for us. But still, there's a part of us that says, there's got to be more to life than getting a new iPhone 8. So insight is a new point of view. But it's not just that. It's a new point of view that points to where there is peace and joy in living. Some people think of Buddhism as pessimistic. It focuses on dukkha, suffering, things, what we feel when we don't like what's going on. But sometimes we have to know that, because if we don't, we'll always be running away from it. And if we keep on avoiding what is unpleasant, we'll never see it for what it is. And to see it as it is insight. This is what I call unnecessary suffering. And in a sense, all suffering, from the Buddhist point of view, is unnecessary. There's death, there's pain, there's changes, there's loss, there's gain, all of that. Suffering. That is insight. 8:40, maybe I'll stop there. No, one more point about insight. In the Buddhist tradition, there are two levels of insight. This was brought up again last Tuesday. The first is mundane. In Pali, we call it lokiya. It's the way of the world. And then the second is super mundane. Mundane, mundo, is Spanish for world. The world and us and me, no difference. But mundane. So mundane insight is an insight that helps us live in the so-called world. So-called because that world is a conventional world. It's not real from the point of view of Buddhism. It's a world of beliefs and thinking and assumptions. It's not in the present moment, but it takes over the so-called present moment so that we don't know the present moment. Mundane insights, you probably have had some mundane, a lot of them, to get to this point and survive and not succumb and die, or suffer so much and end up in a mental institution. Like we probably have learned. And so some people think that we've learned all this in kindergarten, and that's probably true. But as we get older, the insight that an adult has is very different from the insight of a child. Because you need that experience. You need the passage of time, the multiplicity of experience to be able to polish that insight, that understanding. But an example of an insight, and I'm sure you all can come up with an inside is, for instance, that there's a point when worrying about something is not solving it. You're just causing yourself to suffer unnecessarily. Or that when you gossip about people, and usually we gossip to say, oh, isn't that incredible? Oh, I mean, incredibly foolish, stupid. We gossip usually why? To make ourselves feel superior, better. So we learn not to do that. In some cultures, we say, memento mori. We don't speak bad of the dead because the dead are not there to speak up for themselves. But sometimes we learn that it's better if we don't have anything good, commendatory to say about somebody. Maybe let's keep that to ourselves. Maybe we are not right. Maybe we don't really know. A more common insight is that when we hit or hurt somebody, their natural reaction is, number one, to defend themselves in many different ways. And the other thing is to get revenge. I'll get you for this. As though by somebody else suffering because you suffered, it made things right. Doesn't it? But there are all kinds of insights. They help us navigate being in the world with ourselves. So we learn not to beat ourselves in the back. We learn to pat ourselves in the back. Although it's kind of hard to do, right? Then we make friends so that we can pat us in the back.
You pat yourself on the shoulder.
Yeah, right. I mean, so many insights that we develop. All of that is mundane. It makes life a little bit easier, but it doesn't erase the good. Super mundane. Two sentences. Super mundane insight is very different. You can only attain super mundane insight once you develop samadhi and enter into the states of samadhi, which is absorption. Why? Because to attain supramundane insight, you have first to lose the self. But you don't lose the self by letting the self go. If you practice, the self itself will go. You don't need to do anything about it. Because when you do, here comes the self again. See? So the trick is not to make the self do the self thing. And that's much easier than the thing. Because thinking is what creates the difficulty. But don't take my word for it. Buddhism is a pragmatic, empirical system. You hear something, you hear it from your mother, you hear it from a teacher, you read in a book. Not enough. Check your own experience. But first, develop your capacity to see more clearly. And that capacity to see more clearly is what we call meditation. Otherwise, you're just full of self.